On today's show, a crossover episode so that we can cover the New York Islanders prospect pool. We'll talk about the NHL prospects and the prospects outside of the league on today's show of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi, and today we have a special guest on a crossover episode with Locked On Islanders. I have Gil Martin here, host of Locked On Islanders, with me to discuss the prospects from the New York Islanders prospect pool. In the first segment, we'll talk about the NHL guys, so Isaiah George and Maxim Siplakov. In the second segment, we'll cover a bunch of guys from the AHL, William Zifoul, Justin Gill, Alex Jeffries, who's doing really good as well, and a bunch of other guys. And in the final segment, we'll cover the guys outside of the NHL and the AHL. So Cole Eiserman, Danny Nilsson, Jesse Pulkkinen, Marcus Goodloff. We have a bunch of names to go through. But before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins, so visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review. And make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So first order of business, Skill. How's it going? How's this year been for the New York Islanders?
It hasn't been smooth sailing. Let's put it that way. A lot of injuries, a lot of inconsistency. A lot of questions starting to surround this team and what future Lou Lamoriello has as the GM, the way he sort of handled things. But if you look at it with the glass half full approach, they're only, 5 points out of a playoff spot. So the Eastern Conference has struggled in general, and there are a lot of teams fighting for those wild cards.
Yeah, it's not doing better for my Montreal Canadiens either, but let's stay on topic here. Perfect. So first order of business, let's talk about Isaiah George. He's been pretty good this year, been playing as a kind of bottom pairing defenseman for the Islanders with those injuries. Adam Pelech's back in the lineup. That's kind of kicked Isaiah George out of the top six. He's now their seventh defenseman. Hasn't played the last two games, but honestly, from what I've seen from him this year, he's done a pretty good job with the minutes he's been given, playing his usual, typical, great skating shutdown game. I remember talking to you about Isaiah George last year and saying, this kid is legitimate. Keep an eye on this kid. He's going to be playing NHL minutes fairly soon. And so far, that's kind of been the case with Isaiah George. But what do you see as kind of his immediate impact on the team, even with the return of Adam Pelech from injury?
I like what I've seen from Isaiah George. The thing that impresses me most is his hockey IQ. He reads the game really well, knows what to do. Yeah, he's 20 years old. He still makes rookie mistakes, but he does seem to learn from those mistakes, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, more often than not, he makes the simple play, the right play, and he gets the job done. My big question for you about Isaiah George is, how high is his ceiling? Is this more or less what we're going to get, a third pair guy who maybe can become a second pair guy and be sort of steady? Or is there more offensive upside to his game?
Yeah, so with Isaiah George, it's always been a story of kind of really, really reliable hockey. I don't think he doesn't take a lot of risks, which kind of limits how high his upside is offensively, because it's through experimentations and risk-taking that you're able to kind of expand your offensive toolkit and figure out what works and what doesn't at the NHL level. Especially in a system like the Islanders, especially with a GM and a coach like the ones that they have right now, I don't really see a path forward for Isaiah George to develop a higher offensive upside, mainly because he's going to be relied upon to play reliable minutes. That's going to be it's kind of become his etiquette. It's become his title. He's an insulator. That's been true with the London Knights. It's been true at the AHL level as well in the games that I've watched, and it's been true so far in the NHL for him. And I think that's really what made the Islanders want to call him up and have him play NHL minutes is the fact that he can be reliable. He can be an insulator. He can be the guy who stays back and allows a defense partner to push up the ice to create offensively in his stead, right? So I think, especially if he stays with the New York Islanders long term, I think that's going to stay his role. he's probably, in my opinion, he's probably the type of defenseman that's going to end up being a number 4 insulating shutdown defenseman at his peak, at the very best of what Isaiah George can bring to the game. In terms of his immediate impact, next 3, 4, 5 years, though, I'd expect him to stay what he is right now, which is a third pairing shutdown defenseman who's going to be playing penalty killing minutes, who's going to be really smart on breakouts, make simple plays out of his zone. That's kind of what we've seen from Isaiah George so far, and I'd expect that to stay the same. But we also have to talk about Maxim Siplakov, who's been pretty good this year for the Islanders. They signed him out of Russia. He's a rookie this season. He's technically eligible for the Calder. So definitely worth a mention here, despite the fact that he's 26 years old. But, it kind of limits itself to that in the Islanders lineup, right? I mean, it's Isaiah George, Maxim Siplakov. Outside of that, not many young prospects doing very well. But let's talk about Siplakov for a second. How's he been so far this year? How have you found him?
I found him to be good. I mean, obviously, he's still making the adjustment from the wider rinks in Europe to the NHL style and the narrower rink. But you could see he's got a good shot. He sees the game very well, anticipates well. I get the feeling when he becomes more comfortable, you're looking at a 20 to 25 goal kind of a player. What, in your mind, is the biggest key for a player from the KHL to have his game translate to the NHL?
Honestly, a lot of people point to like the shorter ice, but a lot of KHL teams play on hybrid ice, or some of them even have NHL dimension rinks. I think the main issue when going from the KHL to the NHL is forechecking pressure. And that's why Siplakov's progression has been pretty interesting so far, because he hasn't been that bad on forechecks. A lot of the time with Russian hockey, it's a bit more structured breakouts with a lot less chaos. Whereas in the NHL, it's heavy forechecks, it's disrupted play, lots of loose pucks, lots of kind of muddy plays on breakouts, right? And it's the chaos of NHL hockey that makes it so beautiful. But Siplakov has adapted wonderfully to that. I think that he's been very, very good at kind of taking the right angles on defensemen on the forecheck, or kind of angling players out to the side, or just applying smart but also hard pressure. And that's kind of why his progression, his kind of adaptation to the NHL has been not seamless, but decent enough compared to other prospects we've seen in the past. So that's been pretty interesting on his side. But what do you see as kind of his path forward in terms of the lineup of the Islanders long term? We're talking a year, 2, 3 from now. Where is he playing in the Islanders lineup at his peak?
I think right now his projection would be as a second line kind of a guy with second power play time as well. I don't think he's quite going to get to that elite first line, 30 plus goal kind of a thing, but he'll give you 20 to 25 steady, and he'll give it to you, some clutch goals, some really smart plays. And I think he's the kind of player, once he gets more acclimated to the North American game, who can make his line mates better by little things that maybe the casual fan won't necessarily see right away.
Absolutely, yeah. He reminds me a bit of another prospect who made the push from the KHL to the NHL and did it pretty well, Igor Sharangovich. He's got that same ability to just play inside pressure, forecheck hard, get off the wall, get some shots off. That's Siplakov's game, and he's been very interesting this year. I don't think he's going to be in the running for the rookie. I think with the trio of Macklin Celebrini, Matvei Michkov, and Lane Hudson, it's just outside of his reach. I'd even put Logan Stankoven and Dustin Wolf ahead of him, but he's still a very, very good prospect and a great find from the Islanders out of Russia. That's our first segment done. We'll get into our second segment here, where we talk about the AHL guys. We'll do our best to keep it positive on that side. But before I get into any of that, just a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment here, we'll be talking about the AHL prospects of the New York Islanders. So we'll focus on the the prospects playing in Bridgeport so far this season. It's been a bit of a rough year in Bridgeport for a lot of these guys. But let's start with kind of the name that stood out the most so far, a 23-year-old, 24-year-old Alex Jeffries, who's been pretty interesting so far this year. He's got 18 points in 22 games on the season for the Isles over in the AHL. What's kind of the crux of his game? What makes him an effective AHLer right now?
You know, right now, I think what has been sort of his strength is just his ability to see the ice more than anything else. And, you know, he's a little older, as you said, spent time at Merrimack College. So he certainly has a little more experience than a lot of people. And, you know, he's a good skater. He can play smart in all three zones. And the fact that he can both shoot the puck pretty well and set up his line mates pretty well. You know, he may not be outstanding in any one area, but he's very well-rounded, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, in terms of what he could bring to an NHL lineup, I think we're probably talking about either fourth line or maybe kind of third cog on a third line type of player. I don't see the high-end offensive upside in order to be a high-end effective NHLer, but he's smart enough, he's defensively responsible enough, and he's producing well in the AHL. At the same time, a lot of what makes production in the AHL is usage rather than talent, right? So it's more about ice time. It's more about where you're getting your zone starts. Are you getting power play time? Alex Jeffries is getting all that and doing fairly well with it, which is a good credit to him. But we do need to talk about some of the prospects that have been added into this lineup fairly soon that are considered prospects of the upper echelon of what the New York Islanders have to offer. And I think that conversation starts with Samuel Bolduc, whose progression has kind of come to a halt as of late. He still has 9 points in 25 games in the AHL, but it hasn't been the best season for him so far this year, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, his growth kind of stopped last year, and that's very, very frustrating from an Islanders organizational standpoint. I mean, he was on the NHL roster for a good chunk of the year, but spent the season mostly in the press box. And then one thing I could tell you for sure, if you don't play, you're not developing.
Yep. 100%. That can't help at all with his game. William Dufault was a bit in the same boat so far this year as well. 7 points in 23 games. He's bottom of the team in plus minus as well with minus 14. With Dufault, it's always been, can he get shots off in projectable ways at an NHL level? And I don't think he's really developed that area of his game well enough. He's still heavily reliant on rush plays and also paradoxically heavily reliant on his teammates to create those opportunities for him. So it's kind of like, with goal scorers that want to score at the NHL level, it's a lot more about positioning and also timing, right? And I don't think Dufault has developed in either one of those segments well enough. It's stalled his development in the AHL. At this point, I'd be very surprised if we're talking about an NHLer, but at the same time, we've seen some late bloomers come out of nowhere and just kind of shock people in later years. So I wouldn't write him off entirely, but he's not a prospect that I would target in fantasy hockey, for example. At least not in the higher ends of the rounds, that's for sure. We also need to talk about Justin Gill, who was a great signing out of the QMJHL, was one of the QMJHL's best prospects in his final year there. Genuinely phenomenal goal scorer, but he's only got 1 goal in 14 games so far this year. So he's up to 6 points, he still has 5 assists, but how's his development been so far with Bridgeport?
Yeah, it's been pretty stagnant. And, when you look at the fact that Bridgeport is having so much trouble scoring goals this year, they're having trouble defensively as well. Yeah. But you look at the difficulty that they have scoring, it just makes it even that much more frustrating because you would think the opportunities would be there.
Yeah, 100%. With Justin Gill, it's all about like he's a pretty sturdy body. He's about I think he's 6 foot 205, something like that. Pretty sturdy player. He's able to hold his ground fairly well when it comes to contact and shoot inside of that contact. But so far this year, that hasn't really translated so well to the AHL level. He's getting pushed around by AHL defenders. More experienced pros are kind of able to suppress him fairly easily. I think the skating's kind of the main issue with that, but overall, I'm still pretty positive on what Justin Gill can bring to the AHL lineups. I think by the time he adapts and develops, we're talking about an easy 30-goal season player in the AHL. That's kind of my prediction for him. We also need to talk about Calle Odelius. I had this kid in my first round, like genuinely inside of my first round in his draft year, and his progression has not been good enough. I mean, 5 points in 26 games, has been struggling defensively in the AHL, right? Like this isn't the adaptation that the Islanders hoped when they were drafting him, right?
No doubt about that. And, the hopes were certainly higher surrounding him. And it may be a time thing where he needs a little more time to make the adjustment to the pro game. But, the other question is, and I had to ask you this, Hadi, I mean, it seems like there are too many prospects in the Islander system whose progression either has stalled or even looks like they've regressed in some ways.
Yeah.
Is this an organizational issue in your mind?
Yes and no. I think development needs to be hands-on with the types of prospects that they're adding to their system right now, especially, if you look at the past draft, we'll talk about them in a sec, but Cole Eiserman, Jesse Pulkkinen, those are two prospects identified as prospects that'll need very much hands-on development. From what I've seen, from what I've heard, it seems like these guys are pretty much left to their own, and that can't help anyone. Again, we just talked about Samuel Bodzik being benched for pretty much a whole year. That doesn't help his development. But if you're benching him, if he's not playing, at least have your skills coaches on the ice with him consistently in order to help him develop these skills. I think the old school idea of having lunch with your prospects once a month and calling it development, I can't get on board with that. We've seen that shift happen very aggressively with other teams. For example, Montreal, they've gone from what I just talked about to having one of the best skills coaches in the world work with their players once a day. That's a big change and it's helped their progression a lot. So I think development needs an overhaul because their drafting hasn't been all that bad. Like Calle Odelius would have probably benefited from a lot of hands-on approach. Would have been a better prospect by now. I really hope that they make some change on that side because otherwise I'm pretty worried about Cole Eiserman and Jesse Pulkkinen as well. Lastly, I do want to talk about Matt Maggio because he's a prospect that garnered a decent amount of excitement for Islanders fans, last season. I remember us talking about him, and I really lauded his ability to play smart, progressive hockey. But so far this season, he's at 8 points in 25 games? Do I have that right? 8 points in 24 games, and 1 goal, 7 assists for another guy who's pretty well known for his goal scoring as well. So what's happening on that side? Is it the same thing, just stagnation?
Yeah, it just seems to be that his development seemed to have stalled out. And, he was given every opportunity to take a top 6 role and be one of the guys who are counted on to score. And he just hasn't been able to pick up that mantle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty disappointing on that side as well because Maggio is a very, very intelligent prospect, and I'm sure he can do better than this. And I think it's just a matter of time. This team needs to find some gel. They need to be able to play off of each other in more translatable ways. I think if Justin Gill and Matt Maggio take control of this team, take the reins and run with it, I think that's a great start to the steady climb out of the dark hole of the Bridgeport Islanders are in right now. But that's our second segment done. We'll get into our third, where we talk about the prospects outside of the NHL and the AHL. Cole Eiserman, Jesse Pulkkinen, Marcus Gidloff, and a lot more coming up in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at PrizePicks.
Today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. If you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This week on PrizePicks, looking at the hockey board, we have Jack Hughes for more than 4 shots on goal and Artemi Panarin for more than 1 assist. It's so simple to make my picks and have fun with friends while potentially cashing out fast. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly. PrizePicks, run your game.
Alrighty, so let's close things off here with our final segment. We'll be talking about the prospects outside of the NHL and the AHL for the New York Islanders. And I think the conversation starts with Cole Eiserman, who's got 9 goals, 6 assists for 15 points in 16 games so far this year for Boston University in the NCAA. he's been really interesting to watch so far this year. I think he's pretty much more or less the same player he was last year. I don't think there's a lot of progression on that side, but what he does wonderfully, which is score goals. He is so effective when it comes to getting open quickly, getting a stick free, and just ripping pucks with absolutely dominant velocity. I don't think any prospect in the NCAA right now, apart from maybe Ryan Leonard, can match his ability to just rifle pucks. You can do it in stride. You can do it inside of his feet. You can do it out wide. There are so many different ways that Cole Eiserman can impact the game through his goal scoring. There are so many different ways that he can shoot the puck that he's really, really hard to contain. And we've seen that so far this year. I mean, 15 points in 16 games isn't all that bad when it comes to a freshman prospect in this Draft Plus One campaign playing in the NCAA. Where do you see Cole Eiserman kind of fitting into what the Islanders need right now? Like, is goal scoring really their biggest need at the current moment?
It's up there, especially when you consider that their top goal scorers, guys like Brock Nelson and Anders Lee, are in their mid-30s right now. You're going to need guys to come in and replace those players and get some productivity. So, the Islanders are always somewhere in the 20s in goals scored in the league, 22nd, 26th, something like that. Getting a bona fide sniper like Cole Eiserman into the lineup would be a big help. But, to me, the question for him, and it's something the Islanders always talk about, how does he behave when he doesn't have the puck? And to me, that's the area that he's going to need to work on to make it to the NHL.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. It's one thing to be a non-factor defensively, and we've seen prospects that are talented enough offensively that doesn't matter. Patrick Laine can be put in that conversation, Patrick Kane as well. There are a bunch of examples of that. Even Andreas Athanasiou, who had a decent career in the NHL, was basically a non-factor defensively, but none of them are liabilities defensively. It's one thing to not be as impactful. It's another thing to be negatively impacting your team defensively when you're on the ice. I think that's still the case for Cole Eiserman. And if he can get up to non-factor consideration, right, if he can just bump that up one notch to non-factor, I think he'll be fine, because the goal scoring ability, again, is just off the charts phenomenal. But what I've really liked, the one thing I point to when it comes to Cole Eiserman that's progressed is his effort level. It's misplaced at times, especially defensively. Like, at least he's trying, but he's just trying the wrong things and getting into the wrong lanes and overskating his lanes at times and stuff like that. But at least he's trying, which was different from the stretches I saw last year of him, where he was kind of dragging his feet defensively, kind of sagging along the ice, just kind of waiting for an opportunity to break out. At least he's trying now. And I think when you're playing for Boston University, you're not going to be playing a ton if you don't try. So now that he's found that effort level and that desire to try, it's just a matter of kind of picking his moments correctly. But once he gets there, I think he'll be okay.
Two questions I have for you about Eiserman. Number one, how coachable does he come across to you as? And then number two, how many years away do you think he is from having a realistic shot at making the NHL?
Well, coachability wise, I can't give away too much, but it's not the best from what I've heard from last year. I haven't heard anything this year about it, but last year I know it was kind of an issue. But, I don't want to speak too much on that because, I've been 18 and an idiot. So, it's fine. It happens. But when it comes to the amount of years he's going to need to become an NHLer, I think the more patient the Islanders are, the better. I know that, by the time, if we're talking 3 years from now, well, Lee and Nelson are going to be pretty old. They're going to be getting up there in age. There might be a desire to kind of rush him to the NHL. I would be very patient with Cole Eiserman because I think in terms of his processing, his hockey sense on both sides of the puck, there are still some progressions needed. And I think the more time he spends adapting to pro hockey in the AHL before making the jump, the better. Even if he's scoring 40 goals, a season for a couple of seasons, I would still wait it out just to see, are those goals a result of being, an elite goal scorer, an elite shooter, or is it really a result of his reads, his processing, his ability to identify lanes, and all that good stuff? I want to see him score translatable goals before he plays in the NHL. That's kind of the crux of it. So I would say 3 years is a comfortable kind of middle ground. If it takes more, if it takes less, that's fine. But the more patient you are with him, the better. We have other names to talk about here, so I do want to mention Jesse Pulkkinen's name real quick because I was very, very high on this prospect. I made a whole video on him over on my personal YouTube channel around the midway through this past draft class. 6'6", left shot defender. He's an overager. Was very close to getting picked in the first round as well. And so far in Liga, he's been decent, pretty good. In terms of the production, it's been pretty stagnant, but overall his game has developed fairly well. He's continued to be a creative, inventive, daring 6'6" left shot defenseman. You don't find those everywhere. Does that fit well within what the Islanders need in their system right now?
Yeah, it does. And one of the problems that the Islanders have had in recent years is just the transition game, getting the puck out of their zone and transitioning to the attack. And I'm hoping that Pulkkinen can be an asset in that area once he reaches the NHL.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you look at what the Islanders need right now, I think they'll take any amount of size on defense. And that's kind of been the Lou Lamoriello brand defensively. It's just, physical, aggressive defensemen on the blue line. You look at Pulak, you look at Pelech, you look at Alexander Romanov, who I think is the best example of that right now with the Islanders. And Jesse Pulkkinen falls right into that. He's aggressive, he's daring. I think the issue with him is exactly that. He needs to learn to reel it in a little bit, to know when to go all in, when to fold, when to pinch. That's still kind of the progression remaining on that side. But Quinn Finley right now is the top scorer among the Islanders prospects outside of the NHL or AHL right now, with 22 points in 18 games. And this game has been fairly interesting. I remember watching him last year. I believe he was playing with Boston University, if I'm not wrong. He was really interesting. A playmaking winger who was able to rifle the puck really effectively as well. Last year he was playing with Wisconsin. Yeah, he's a playmaking winger with great offensive skill as well in terms of goal scoring. He's able to rifle pucks in motion, get pucks under between his feet and just rifle them really accurately. His shot's really deceptive as well. He's able to kind of mask his intentions. You never know if he's shooting left or right on a goalie. Very interesting prospect. He's average size, 6 foot 180, but I think it was a great pickup for the Islanders in the third round 2 years ago. So he's looking very, very interesting. And I like the way his game has progressed. He's a Chicago Steel product as well. The Chicago Steel are a phenomenal school for hockey. They're really, really good at developing translatable players. So I'm excited to see how his game goes moving forward. Lastly, let's choose one prospect among this bunch here. I think we're going to go with Marcus Gidloff. He's been very interesting so far this year after being picked by the Islanders last season in last year's draft. So far, he's got a .917 save percentage right now in the SHL in 8 games, which is not bad. What's the Islanders need in net? Do they really need someone that'll be able to step into the pipes and be a dominant starting goaltender for years to come, or is that something they already have?
Well, I mean, you've got Ilya Sorokin, and he has 7 more years left on his contract. So, but the backup goalie situation, I mean, Semyon Varlamov has 2 years left after this year on his contract. That would certainly be something that maybe the timing would be right as far as, when Varlamov is ready to step out, you have somebody who would be ready to step into that role, and then either you allow him to become the starter if he proves that he's able to do that, or you could trade him away for whatever else you may need. So hopefully you get that other goalie prospect closer to being ready, and you figure another couple of years and you'll need somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Gidloff, I mean, we're talking about a 6'6", 212-pound goalie. He's 19 years old. He's not done developing physically as well. And it's all about technique and reactive hockey with him. He's really, really good at reading plays in advanced ways, kind of identifying where the puck is at all times. Very rarely does he lose track of the puck. And he's also got the technique for a bigger body to be able to kind of integrate his posts at 6'6". You're not beating him from the corner, especially in the NHL. Those top end scorers like Cole Caulfield and those types of players love to shoot from corners now, try to catch goalies on the RVH above the shoulder. You're not beating Gidloff that way. He's just not going to let that happen. Overall, I think the Islanders are pretty in a similar position with Gidloff as the Nashville Predators were with Yaroslav Askarov, and they got a pretty good return for him out of trade. So if Gidloff can develop similarly to that and be the type of prospect that they can trade out if needed, if Ilya Sorokin continues to be a high-end goalie, I think that that's an interesting proposition on that side. They could get a decent center prospect back. They can kind of shore up their prospect pool even further, or trade for an established piece for this type of player. So, very, very interesting goalie prospect. Again, he has decent numbers so far in the SHL. A 917 save percentage in that league is not easy, especially as a 19-year-old. And the fact that he's playing full-time SHL minutes right now is very interesting for his progression. But that's our episode done. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, remember to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our next shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of December. This has been Hadi with guest host Gil Martin. Happy holidays, and we hope you tune in next time.